writing, they just stick with you. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham Jail.
Yeah.
That's one of those pieces.
It really is.
You all sent this one in, and I have to say, going deep on this, like beyond just the I have a dream highlights.
Yeah.
It's intense. Like you can almost feel the energy of the civil rights movement on the page.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so different from the speeches, right?
Yeah.
This is a letter.
Right.
Written from a jail cell.
It's personal.
King's responding to criticism here, not to applause. Makes it hit differently. You know what I mean?
For sure. I mean, imagine getting called out by a group of clergymen.
Right.
Ending up in jail. And then your response becomes this landmark text.
Talk about making a statement.
Seriously. And they call his actions, get this, unwise and untimely. Which, hello, irony alert.
Yeah, a lot has changed since then. But that's what makes it so interesting, right? King doesn't just defend himself, he lays out his whole philosophy.
It's true.
He combines philosophy, theology, personal experience. It's kind of amazing.
It really is. It's like we're getting this glimpse into his mind, like right at this crucial moment.
Totally.
We all know I have a dream, but this letter, this is different. This is King unfiltered.
100%. And to really get it, we got to remember the context. Birmingham, Alabama, 1963.
Ooh, yeah.
Talk about a powder keg.
No kidding.
King was there with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference going head to head with segregation. This wasn't some intellectual exercise. This was life or death stuff.
Okay, so these clergymen, they write to King, right? Mm-hmm. And basically tell him he's stirring up trouble, that he's an outsider.
They wanted him to just stick to negotiating, no rocking the boat.
And King's response?
Well, he kind of flips the script. He goes big picture.
He did, didn't he?
He says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Boom. Mic drop.
Right. Suddenly it's not just about Birmingham. It's about this like interconnectedness of the fight for equality.
He even points out that he was invited to Birmingham. They were trying to paint him as some kind of agitator just passing through.
Right. But he'd been working with groups there organizing the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. He knew the struggle there firsthand.
It wasn't impulsive. It was strategic.
Exactly. And for King, silence in the face of injustice, that was just as bad as supporting it. He had to act.
Which brings us to this whole direct action debate. These clergymen, they wanted him to play by the rules, work things out quietly.
Behind closed doors.
Right. But King, he throws him a curveball.
He agrees with them.
He did.
Well, sort of. He says negotiation is the goal. But direct action, the sit-ins, the marches.
The stuff that gets attention.
Exactly. He says that's what forces people to the negotiating table. He calls it creating a crisis. Tension that just can't be ignored.
Even today, those words, they still have this power to them.
For sure.
Even knowing he was always about nonviolent resistance.
And that's so important to remember. He wasn't advocating violence. Not at all. But he was advocating for disruption, like a powerful, love-driven disruption. He wanted to shake people out of their complacency, you know?
Yeah, like you could ignore a polite request, but you can't ignore a fire alarm.
Exactly. And he even compares it to, get this, Socrates.
Like Socrates, why?
Yeah, he says Socrates used questioning to challenge people, to make them think critically. And that's what direct action was for King.
It's about forcing the conversation, making it impossible to ignore injustice any longer.
Right.
And he takes this idea even further with this distinction he makes between just and unjust laws.
Oh, yeah.
And that, to me, that's where things get really interesting.
This is where he gets philosophical, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he's not just talking about strategy anymore. He's laying down a moral argument.
Right.
He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, a just law lines up with moral law, and an unjust law, it degrades human personality.
Powerful stuff. But also kind of hard to pin down, right?
How so?
Well, who gets to decide what's moral? It feels subjective, like what's moral to one person might not be to another.
And that's the big question, right? Yeah. King's drawing on this whole tradition of thought, natural law theory.
Oh, like going way back.
Way back. We're talking thinkers like St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, people who believe that there's this higher moral order that goes beyond any government.
So it's not just about what's legal, it's about what's right.
Exactly.
But then he gets really specific too. Like obviously he talks about segregation laws.
Of course.
But also things like poll taxes.
Which were designed to stop Black people from voting.
Exactly. or laws that were used to shut down peaceful protests.
He saw through all of that. And that's what makes his argument so strong. It's not theoretical,
Yeah.
He's talking about the real lives being affected. People denied basic rights because of these so-called laws.
But he's saying the law itself can be a weapon.
Right. And he's saying if a law is being used to hurt people, to dehumanize them, then we have a moral obligation to challenge it, to resist it.
It's like that quote, an unjust law is no law at all.
Exactly.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
But King, he lived it.
He absolutely did. And it's a challenge to us too, like as you're listening to this, think about the laws, the policies today that just don't sit right with you. King asks us to sit with that discomfort, to figure out what we believe is right, even when it's hard.
And then to do something about it.
Yes.
Just like he did.
And this is where I think you can really hear the heartbreak in his words. He starts talking about the white moderates, the people he thought would be on his side.
And he does not hold back.
No, he does not. He calls them out for their lukewarm acceptance, their preference for order over justice.
Ouch.
Right. You can just feel the disappointment there because these were people he'd hoped to bring along, people he thought would get it, see the urgency, the moral imperative to act. And they weren't there yet.
Like, they were fine with the idea of equality in theory.
Maybe someday.
But not with the messiness of actually dismantling the systems that were causing the inequality in the first place.
It's easier to just keep things the way they are.
Right. And King saw right through that. He called out this whole wait mentality. Like, just be patient. Change will happen eventually.
When really all that waiting was doing was allowing the injustice to continue.
Keeping things exactly the same.
And King knew that justice delayed is justice denied. He talks about time not being neutral. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil.
And you really feel that urgency when you read this letter.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he doesn't just talk about injustice. He brings it to life. The stinging darts of segregation, the abyss of despair, the whirlwind of revolution. He wants you to feel it, not just think about it.
He wants you to understand what it's like to live it. That's what makes this letter so different. It's not just an intellectual argument. It's an emotional one. It's from the heart.
It's like he's grabbing you by the shoulders, saying, this is real. This is happening right now. But even with all that, the frustration, the anger, there's this undercurrent of hope in his words.
Isn't there? It's incredible. It speaks to his faith, I think. His belief that love could actually win out, that a better world was possible. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he never gave up on that vision.
Never lost sight of the goal.
Right. And then there's the part where he talks about being labeled an extremist.
Oh, man.
Loaded term, right?
Yeah.
But he doesn't shy away from it. He owns it.
He does. He owns it.
And he asks this question. It's so powerful. He says, will we be extremists for hate or will we be extremists for love?
Whoa.
Flips the whole thing on its head, Makes you think about what you're willing to fight for.
And then he goes on to list all these figures from history. Jesus, Amos, Paul, Lincoln. All people who were considered extremists in their time.
And not just any figures. These are giants. People who changed the world.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, if wanting justice makes me an extremist, well, I'm in good company.
And that's the question he's putting to us, right? Whose side are we on? Are we on the side of the status quo or are we on the side of justice?
And he's especially tough on the white church. You can tell he feels let down.
Yeah, there's this real sense of betrayal there. He calls them out for choosing order over justice, for siding with the powerful instead of standing with the oppressed.
And what's crazy is that critique still feels relevant today.
It does, doesn't it? Makes you wonder how different things could be if more people of faith were willing to speak truth to power like King did.
To risk their own comfort for the sake of others.
Exactly. And he risked everything, didn't he? His freedom, his reputation, his life. And he did it all with this incredible sense of hope.
Yeah.
Like he could see beyond the darkness of that moment. He could see a better future. And he believed with every fiber of his being that we could get there.
He writes about the stars of love and brotherhood shining over the nation. It's beautiful. It's this reminder that even in the midst of all the hate, all the injustice, there's always hope.
And that's a message we need now more than ever, don't we? There's still so much work to do. But we're not alone in this fight. We have King's legacy to guide us, his words to inspire us.
Absolutely. And one thing that really stuck with me was this idea of moral means for immoral ends.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
He was talking about how the police in Birmingham were being praised for maintaining order during the protests.
Right. But their methods were brutal.
Exactly. And their goal wasn't to protect people. It was to protect a system that was inherently unjust.
It's easy to get caught up in doing things the right way without asking ourselves if the goal is even a good one.
We have to be willing to question everything. The laws, the systems, even our own deeply held beliefs.
And be willing to change, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable.
To be a little unwise and untimely.
Maybe that's how we create real change.
Maybe so. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. But, wow, what a deep dive.
It really was.
Thanks to everyone who sent in this incredible piece of writing. And to all of you listening, thank you for being here, for being willing to go deep with us, to ask the tough questions, and to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep fighting for what's right. You know, some pieces